All right, next thing I want to talk about, Mike Tomlin. He was asked about Kenny Pickett. Didn't really take it well. He was asked about Kenny Pickett's passer rating from quarters 1 through 3 being, I believe, a 75.3. And then in the fourth quarter, it's a 108.2. Whoever asked the question, which we're not going to name names, only asked about quarters 1 through 3. Tomlin immediately jumped in, goes, quote, "What is his rating in the fourth quarter?" The answer was 108.2. Well, just ask it from that perspective. He's awesome in the fourth quarter. Man, he rises up to those moments. He wants to be the reason why we're successful. He prepares his tail off. In some instances, when people run from challenges, he runs to challenges. So that's why his performance is so good in the fourth. Those other quarters we'll work on. Before we dive into anything else here, I get it that Kenny is really good in the fourth quarter and you could win in the fourth quarter as long as you keep it close. Is it an issue that Mike Tomlin is just like, yeah, whatever, man, at least he's good in the fourth quarter and we'll just worry about the other three eventually?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was expecting, some kind of poorly worded question or something like that. No, that's a perfectly fair question. And I don't understand why he's being so dodgy about it. That stuff matters. He's good for one quarter of the game. That's literally what we're saying. I get it. I think this version of Kenny is better than the inverse. Being good in the clutch moments, I think is much harder to teach than being good in just regular moments. So
yes,
if you can get Kenny to even a decent level in those three quarters, then the fourth quarter stuff looks even better. But yeah, this stuff matters. It's real. It's why you weren't able to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's why you couldn't keep pace with the 49ers or the Texans. That Texans game, it finished 30-6, but
yeah,
it was relatively close for more than three quarters, I want to say.
If you show up in quarters 1 through 3, you're not looking at a 30-6 game no matter what.
Right. And so this stuff matters. I don't know. For him to brush it off is so weird, and I don't get it. And I feel like it dismisses what is I don't know. For him to be well, no, just look at it from the fourth quarter. No, that's not what this is about.
Yeah.
We have no questions about the fourth quarter. That's fine. But there are three quarters. There's 75% of the game that he's not been very good in. Why are you not as concerned about that? That is the vast majority of the game. It is. I don't get it.
You're 8-0 if you show up in those first three. I mean, maybe 7-1 if you show up in those first three quarters of football. That's the thing is, just like you said, Houston, you don't let games get out of control. You don't rely on your defense so much. I think that's the biggest issue here and why people are asking the questions. I don't think it necessarily has to do with, why does Kenny stink from quarters 1 through 3, but he's so good in the fourth? And I think the bigger picture, the broader question is, how far are you willing to push this before it comes back to bite you one final time? Because you are not going to be able to just rely on your defense to hold a team to within 7 points heading into the fourth quarter. That's not sustainable. It might be sustainable for the 5 games that you made it sustainable for, and it might be sustainable for another 5 games this season, but it's not going to be sustainable against Cincinnati in the playoffs. It's not going to be sustainable against Kansas City in the playoffs or Miami in the playoffs or any of those teams. You're going to find yourself in situations where your defense just can't do enough, and at that point, the game's over. And I think that's the most pressing thing is, Kenny isn't great for 75% of the game, and that's huge, but you completely eliminate any chance that you have to win a football game if your defense does not play perfect from quarters 1 through 3. It can do whatever it wants in the fourth quarter as long as it keeps it within a reasonable score that Kenny could go win a football game. But those first 3 quarters, if your defense doesn't show up, if you're not getting turnovers, Jacksonville's a prime example. They kept it to 10 points, but that game should have been so much worse than it was. Worse than it was.
Never felt like they were in it,
No, exactly. And that's the thing is that's a 10-point game. If you don't get those 2 turnovers, you lose by much more. If you execute off of those 2 turnovers earlier in the game, you win the football game. Like, that's the thing, is you are limiting yourself to, we have to be perfect on defense for 3 quarters. Otherwise, there is no opportunity to win. That's not a sustainable way to win football games. That's not a sustainable way to win in the NFL, especially in 2023. That's the more pressing thing. Like, I get it. When the Steelers win, Tomlin is allowed to be as cocky as he wants and, address things however he wants because the Pittsburgh Steelers won. But just like you said, they are ignoring a very serious issue. Here's the question that comes with that. If Kenny does not improve throughout the season and the Steelers continue to be a fourth quarter team offensively, and maybe they make the playoffs, maybe they don't make the playoffs, is that enough for the Pittsburgh Steelers in your eyes to go into the offseason and say there is no chance we even think about adding a quarterback? There's no chance we think about adding competition. Kenny Pickett is our guy. There are no questions there. Or do you look at it like maybe it is a situation where you do have to have a backup plan just in case Kenny does not improve?
Well, I don't think they will go into this offseason kind of regardless of anything, looking for a quarterback. I just don't, Mike Tomlin pretty much didn't say it very plainly, but the way he's defending Kenny, that's what I believe. But I think, if Kenny doesn't improve at all from now until the end of the season, it's irresponsible not to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, you look at this draft class, and it's some of the quarterbacks in there are pretty impressive, and it's a pretty deep class in that way. So, you have to do your due diligence there. But I don't think that necessarily means that, if Kenny doesn't, make noticeable steps forward before the end of the year, I don't think that necessarily means that you have to start finding a new starter.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can give Kenny a little bit more time than that. But yeah, you got to start thinking about it. It's like, and if and only if Kenny just doesn't show you any kind of improvement over the final 9 games of the year.
9 games, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know if that'll happen. I kind of don't expect it to happen, but yeah, that's if Kenny, I think, shows you anything that you feel like, we can work with, they are going to grab onto that and carry it into another year. Because I just don't think they want to go through another quarterback search either. Like, they felt like they had their guy, and I think until the wheels fall off completely, they're going to stick with him. What
is the wheels falling off completely? What do you look at that as?
Well, I don't know, because not to always bring it back to the Patriots, but I feel like they're in very similar situations as...
We know the fans love when you bring it back to the Patriots.
Well, I feel like as much as the Steelers are in a little bit of a better situation, but they were pretty similar. I feel like, coming off of really historic stretches, you've got a coach who carried you through some really good times, but you had to switch quarterbacks, and that's created some issues. That transition has created some issues, and I can tell you no one outside of the Patriots locker room really sees it with Mac Jones, but they've rocked with him for a while. And he's won some games for them, but nothing really that significant. And the wheels are starting to come off now, but it's how many, when he starts committing tons of turnovers, when it doesn't look like he really has a command of the offense. I feel like that right now, I don't know if Kenny's actively hurting the team, if I can necessarily say that. But if there comes a day where you look at it and he is turning the ball over, where he's, just plain missing open receivers, things like that, not taking advantage of a game plan that's working, that's when you start to have that conversation. That's when you start to think, okay, here's the wheels kind of falling off. Because there's also just the other side of it is there is a situation where he's just not moving the team forward at all, you're just kind of spinning your tires, and you're not really doing anything different with Kenny at quarterback. And then that's a conversation of, well, we know what this guy is, and the ceiling isn't very high.
Yeah, I agree. I look at it, when you run out of excuses, that's when it is time to fully consider change for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And right now there are just too many excuses. The defense has some issues. Matt Canada is obviously going to take a hefty load of the blame for the time being. People are going to get on Mike Tomlin. People are going to get on the offensive line. they're going to come up with a billion reasons. George Pickens being frustrated probably adds to that list. When you run out of excuses, when it becomes this is Kenny Pickett is the problem, I agree. That's when there are no other reasons than to move on. I agree. There's almost no chance the Pittsburgh Steelers move on after the season or even bring in a backup option. Like I've been asked that by so many people over the last, I don't know, week and a half of just, hey, is there any chance the Steelers move on after the season or at least bring somebody in to compete? And my answer is no. If I had to guess the Steelers quarterback room a year from now, it is Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky. I mean, insert third name here. It could be Mason Rudolph. It could be somebody else, depending on if Mason Rudolph gets signed somewhere else. But if I had to guess, it looks much similar, or it looks very similar to what it does today. Now, if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm bringing in somebody, I don't know if I'm drafting a quarterback in the first round, but I'm considering drafting a quarterback in the first 3 rounds to just have somebody there just in case,
introduce some competition.
Exactly. Healthy competition with healthy competition with almost no expectation. Not like this is competition that's going to come in here. Kenny, you have to prove yourself. More of just like, let's see what this other guy has as in a backup role, and then we could internally evaluate where we stand in our quarterback situation if Kenny does not improve. But that's a big if. I think that if is, I don't expect that if to change. If that's, I don't want to be too harsh, but I just expect the end of the season to look much like the first half of the season, where it's like, okay, well, Kenny's really good in the fourth quarter. He's not very good the rest of the game. That's an issue, but the Pittsburgh Steelers see the value in the fourth quarter and see where they could go from there. But maybe I'm wrong. But I don't think that I agree with you. I don't think anybody has any intentions of making a move yet. They found their quarterback. Everybody likes their quarterback. And quite frankly, Kenny doesn't stink. That's the biggest thing is Kenny does not stink. He might not be good, but he does not stink. And he shines in moments where you need him to shine. And on top of that, the Pittsburgh Steelers are 5-3. Right. If the Steelers were 3-5 or 2-6 or whatever, totally different conversation, but they are 5-3. There's no reason to blow things up or even consider blowing things up if you're a winning football team.